Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
I had always believed that love was a language spoken in absolutes. For me, to love someone meant to give them the keys to every room inside you. It was about opening the most vulnerable doors of your heart with the certainty that they would do the same. Trust wasn't a component of a relationship. It was the foundation itself. Without it, you were just two people living in the beautifully decorated ruins of what could have been. In the first few years with Delilah, this seemed mutual. Our life was built on easy laughter, on shared plans whispered in the dark. We fought over silly things, like who left the milk out, and always made up before sleep stole the day from us. Our home was filled with a warmth that had nothing to do with the thermostat. It was us. But time is a subtle thief. It doesn't break down the door. It enters through the cracks you don't even see forming. The changes came so slowly, only a heart paying close attention would notice. The hugs started to last a second less. Important conversations were always postponed for a better time that never arrived. Dinners at the table, where we would unpack our days, devolved into quick meals eaten in the blue glow of the television screen. Each of us lost in a different world. And though it all ached, a deep, dull ache in my chest, I chose to believe it was just a phase. A storm to be weathered. Delilah had always been the more reserved one, but lately, she had become an enigma. A beautiful puzzle I no longer had the pieces for. She'd arrive home late, offering shallow explanations that floated in the air between us like smoke, dissipating before I could grasp them. Her phone, once left casually on the counter, was now her closest guarded secret. She had these sudden outbursts of impatience over the smallest comment. A simple question like, "How was your day?" could be met with a sigh heavy enough to suck the air out of the room. I felt it, deep in my bones. Something was fundamentally wrong. But I'm a fixer. I look for solutions, not conflicts. I told myself it was work stress, the pressures of life. I made excuses for her because the alternative was too terrifying to confront. So when she proposed a train trip, just for a few days, it felt like a lifeline. "We need to breathe, Caleb," she had said, her eyes avoiding mine. "We need to reconnect, away from all the distractions." In my head, that invitation was a flare of hope in the fog. Maybe she's trying. Maybe there's still something left to save. I agreed without hesitation. I packed my bags with more hope than clothes, imagining the conversations we'd have, the laughter we might rediscover. I pictured us sitting together, the landscape blurring past, finally breaking through the silence that had become a third passenger in our lives. But from the moment we boarded the train, I knew something was off. Her enthusiasm was selective. It was a performance. She smiled brightly at other passengers, engaged in easy chatter with strangers, but with me, it was like her gaze hit an invisible wall and deflected. It was a cold, hard lesson. She was the sun, shining on everyone but me. The steady click-clack of the wheels on the track was a metronome, counting down the seconds of my failing hope. Delilah kept finding reasons to leave our cabin. "I'm just going to get a coffee," she'd say, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I need to stretch my legs. The view from the observation car is supposed to be amazing." Each excuse was a small cut. I pretended to sleep to avoid the forced, stilted conversations that filled the space when she was there. Through slitted eyelids, I watched her check her phone, a small, secret smile playing on her lips. A smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. I saved every detail, like a detective building a case, arranging the pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. During one of these escapes, she was gone longer than usual. An hour stretched into an hour and a half. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I told myself I was being paranoid, but the silence in the cabin was too loud. I decided to walk to the dining car. I wasn't expecting to find anything, really. I just wanted to know where she was. I just wanted to feel like I wasn't completely alone on this trip meant for two. When I saw her, the world stopped. Literally. The motion of the train, the low hum of conversation from other tables, the clinking of silverware. It all faded into a dull, distant roar. She was at a table in the corner, facing away from the door. Across from her sat a man I had never seen before. Julian. They were laughing like old friends, their heads close together over a shared bottle of wine. And then, I watched as she reached out, her fingers gently tracing the line of his jaw. It was a gesture of such casual intimacy it stole the breath from my lungs. Without hesitation, she leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't a frantic, stolen kiss. It was calm, intimate, the kind of kiss that speaks of familiarity, of an ending, my ending. I didn't move. I didn't shout. I didn't run. My hands, slick with a sudden cold sweat, pulled my phone from my pocket. They trembled, but my gaze was steady. The lens was a barrier between me and the raw, unshielded pain. I pressed record. While the camera captured every second of that unhurried betrayal, I felt something inside me crumble. The foundation of trust, the very bedrock of my love for her, was turning to dust. But at the same time, a new structure was rising in its place. It wasn't built of anger. It was built of clarity. A cold, sharp, devastating clarity. That image on my screen replaced every doubt I had ignored, every excuse I had made, every lie I had told myself for years. It was the undeniable, irrefutable truth. I recorded every second of that kiss, as if I needed concrete proof for a betrayal my eyes could no longer deny. But while filming, I noticed something else. That man, Julian, he had boarded with someone else. I remembered clearly because I had watched the passengers around us when we first got on. He had been with a blonde woman, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Clara. They had seemed close, sitting together a few cabins ahead of ours. His wife, I had assumed. That single memory lit a fire inside me. A different kind of fire. Not hot with rage, but bright with purpose. If he was cheating, then Delilah wasn't the only one lying on this train. With the phone still in my hand, the recording saved, I turned and walked away from the dining car. My steps were firm. The slight sway of the train no longer mattered. I had found my balance. I walked carriage by carriage, my eyes scanning each face. I wasn't looking for Delilah anymore. I was looking for her. The blonde woman, Clara. For a moment, I thought about giving up. What was the point? Maybe she had gotten off at an earlier stop. Maybe it wasn't my place. But it was. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about truth. He and Delilah had created this web of lies, and two other people were caught in it. I was one. She was the other. She deserved to know. I passed families laughing, teenagers taking selfies, old men sleeping in reclined seats. And then I saw her. She was alone, reading a book, her brow furrowed as if the weight of the world was on her shoulders. She had no idea how heavy it was about to become. I stopped in front of her seat. I didn't say a word. I just extended my phone, the video already playing on the screen, the volume off. The woman took a second to understand, her eyes squinted at the small screen. When she recognized her husband's face, then Delilah's. Her own face drained of all color. Her breathing became short, ragged. She watched the entire video, to the very end. Then, she slowly looked up at me, her eyes filled with a shattered, bitter understanding. A single, venomous phrase escaped her lips, barely a whisper. That son of a bitch. She said nothing else. She just stared into the middle distance, at nothing, like someone watching their own life break apart from the inside. I simply turned and walked away. My part was done. Delilah returned to our cabin more than an hour later. She was humming, a slight flush on her cheeks, her hair loose around her shoulders. She smelled faintly of a different perfume. A man's cologne. She was smiling, as if nothing had happened. I was sitting on my bunk, my phone in my hands. When she entered, I didn't say a word. I just pressed play and extended the device to her. Delilah stopped. The smile vanished from her face as if it had been wiped clean. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, her expression a desperate attempt at neutrality, but the trembling at the corners of her mouth gave her away. She watched the video in its entirety. When it ended, the silence in the cabin was absolute. "This," she started, her voice raspy, "this isn't what it looks like." The classic, tired line. I don't even know that man. He started talking to me, offered me some wine. I drank too much. You know I can't handle much, Caleb. The excuses tumbled out, clumsy and rehearsed. It was a mistake. I swear to God, it was a mistake. I was confused, weak. It means nothing. I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just a profound, empty calm. My expression was sober, my eyes filled with a quiet finality she couldn't comprehend. "We're getting off at the next station," I said, my voice even. "We're going home." Her face twisted, not with remorse, but with indignation. "Go home? Are you crazy? The resort reservation is paid for a whole week. I'm not throwing that money away because of one stupid mistake I already admitted to. If you want to go back, be my guest." She crossed her arms, a queen on a crumbling throne. "But I'm getting off at our stop, taking the transfer, and enjoying what we paid for." I breathed in deeply, and I let her words hang in the air. I didn't argue. I didn't respond. I just stayed silent until the train hissed to a stop at the next station. As soon as it did, I stood up, grabbed my single bag, and left the cabin without a backward glance. As I stepped onto the platform, I noticed a commotion a few feet away. A couple was also getting off, their mood clearly tense. The woman was speaking loudly, pointing her finger in the man's face. It was Clara, and the man, visibly embarrassed, trying to calm her down, was Julian. Their confrontation was intense. Her voice was sharp with betrayal. His was thick with pathetic justifications. I walked right past them, a silent ghost in their drama. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt nothing but a singular focus on my next step. I got into the nearest taxi, gave the driver my home address, and left that entire mess behind me. 2 hours later, as I was walking into the quiet solitude of my house, I knew Delilah was just getting off at her stop. I pictured the resort driver holding a sign with both our names on it. I pictured her getting into the car, alone, staring at her phone, still believing she was in control. I dropped my bag in the hallway and sat on the couch. The house was silent, exactly how I needed it. There were no shouts, no poorly told excuses, no pretense. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt peace, a hard, raw peace. The kind of peace that comes when the pain finally becomes a boundary, and your heart decides it will no longer accept crumbs. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in weeks, as if a physical weight had been lifted from my chest. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. I made coffee and drank it slowly, watching the sun rise. And with the dawn came a new kind of serenity. I knew who I was, and I knew I was not going to be the man who swallowed lies out of fear of starting over. I got up, grabbed my laptop, and sat at the kitchen table. The dismantling began. I logged into our banks. I blocked her access to every credit card. I emptied our joint accounts, transferring my the half I had earned, the inheritance from my parents, into a new, private account. I changed the passwords to our streaming services, our utilities, our life. Everything I could do to protect what I had built, what my family had given me, I did that morning. Each click of the mouse was a quiet declaration of independence. Then, I called a lawyer I trusted. I scheduled a meeting for that afternoon. The divorce process had begun before Delilah had even had her first poolside breakfast. She was in her world, a paradise built on my money and her lies. And I was in mine, methodically taking it apart, brick by brick. While I was signing the initial retainer with my lawyer, Delilah was living in her fantasy. I could picture it perfectly. Sunglasses on. Even though there wasn't much Sunday, a relaxed posture in a lounge chair. Her only concern, I imagined, was where Julian was. The man she had planned this entire trip around. I found out later, much later, how her day actually went. She picked up her phone and sent him a message. "Have you checked in yet? Where are you?" The plan, as it was eventually revealed, was for them to take advantage of the resort, to meet in the corridors, on the beach, on excursions, like teenagers on a secret vacation. But the response took longer than she expected. Minutes turned into an hour. Finally, her phone vibrated. The reply came, direct and panicked. "A man I think was your husband showed a video of us to my wife. Clara lost it. We're getting a divorce. We left the train. I'm at a friend's house. What happened with you?" She stared at the screen. The smile she had maintained all morning disappeared. But instead of replying, instead of feeling any sense of crisis, she locked her phone and put it away. She didn't want to deal with more drama, at least not then. She got up, went to the spa, and proceeded to live as if everything was under control. Pools, massages, drinks with little umbrellas. She pushed the problem of me, of Julian, of his wife, into a neat little box in the back of her mind. The present was for pleasure. The consequences were for the future. What Delilah didn't know was that the future was already here. It arrived on her 4th day at the resort. She had decided to visit the nearby city. She paid for the taxi in cash and walked through the brightly lit streets with that forced sense of freedom she used as a shield. She chose a charming, expensive restaurant for dinner, ordered a sophisticated dish, a glass of fine wine, and played the part of a confident, independent woman. Everything was perfect until the moment she had to pay the bill. She handed over her primary credit card. The waiter returned, an uncomfortable expression on his face. "Ma'am, the payment was declined." She disguised her tension with a little laugh, took another card from her wallet, and handed it over. "Try this one. Sometimes, the chip acts up." The waiter returned minutes later, repeating the same phrase. Confused, she picked up her phone to access the bank app. Password incorrect. She tried again and again. Nothing. The user data does not match. A cold knot of dread began to form in her stomach. She excused herself from the table and went outside. She called me. I saw my phone light up with her name. I watched it ring until it went to voicemail. She called again. I silenced it, and again. Then a text message came through. Answer me, please. I need help. The card is rejected. Something happened. I watched the message status turn from delivered to read. And I left it there. A digital monument to her unanswered plea. Staring at her phone, with no other options, she finally broke down and called her best friend, Audrey. She made up a rushed excuse about a temporary bank problem, about being stranded, and asked for help paying for dinner. Audrey, though confused, was a good friend. She transferred the money for the meal and even sent extra for the taxi back. Delilah thanked her, her voice thick with feigned embarrassment, pretending it was all a simple, frustrating mix-up. But as she rode back to the hotel, the real impact of it all began to sink in. The invisible walls I had built that morning were finally becoming visible to her. The resort was no longer a paradise. It was a beautiful cage, and she was beginning to realize she was trapped. The last 3 days of her trip were a slow-motion nightmare. Nothing was fun anymore. The pool felt cold. The sun didn't warm her. The spa couldn't relax the tension coiled in her shoulders. She spent most of her time lying in her king-sized bed, staring at her phone, waiting for messages from me that never came. With each hour of my silence, her anguish grew, and with it, her loneliness. On the day of her departure, the resort driver took her to the train station. The return ticket was already paid for, which was her only relief. But upon arriving back in our city, she had to rely on Audrey again to pay for the taxi home. She arrived at our house dragging her suitcase and the tattered remnants of her dignity. She tried to insert her key into the lock, just as she always did. It wouldn't turn. She tried again, forcing it a little, suspicious, until the metallic clink of key against the wrong lock confirmed her fear. The lock had been changed. Irritated, her wounded pride shouting louder than her exhaustion, she knocked on the door. Hard. A few seconds later, the door opened. I was there, calm as I had been since the beginning of this ordeal. I was holding a white envelope in my hand. What is that? She asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. The divorce papers, I replied, my voice flat, holding the envelope out to her. I suggest you find a good lawyer. You can't do this, she shouted, her voice rising. This house is mine, too. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her, this stranger who had shared my bed for years. This beautiful, big house, I said, my voice dangerously quiet, was built with the sweat of my parents. They left it to me as an inheritance. Not a single penny of yours is in these walls. You have no rights here. She took a step forward, puffing up with indignation, but stopped when she saw the look in my eyes. It was a look she had never seen before. A look of absolute finality. And my stuff? Where is it? She asked, her voice choking. I already put everything in your car, I said, pointing towards the driveway. The key is on the windshield. She just stood there, looking at me, as if expecting some last-minute gesture of mercy, a final reprieve. But that chapter of my life was closed. The man who would have offered her mercy was gone, replaced by the man she had created. She tried one last time. And the cards? The money from the joint account? You can't just do that to me, Caleb. Have your lawyer talk to mine, I replied. Other than that, get out of my life. And I shut the door, not with a slam, just a quiet, decisive click, the sound of an ending. She walked to her car. Her suitcases were there, clothes folded carelessly, boxes of personal items, and the car key, exactly where I said it would be. She got in, slammed the door in a flash of impotent rage, and started the engine. The only person she could go to at that moment was Audrey. When she arrived at her friend's house, she was greeted with a quick hug and a worried look. Audrey let her in, offered her water, and listened. Delilah talked nonstop, painting me as a crazy, possessive, controlling man. Someone who had simply snapped and decided to end everything for no reason. She spoke with anger, distorting the story, omitting everything about Julian, the resort, the kiss on the train. She cried. She raged. She made herself the victim. Audrey listened in silence. What Delilah didn't know was that Audrey had already called me, worried about the strange story of the rejected card at the restaurant. She had called me a few nights before, and I, without beating around the bush, had told her everything. Every single detail. The video. The kiss. The conversation with Clara. The silent calculation. The protection of my assets. The cold, hard decision to end it right there. Audrey had listened in stunned silence. And now, with Delilah seated in front of her, crying crocodile tears, making herself the martyr, Audrey just observed. She watched her friend repeat that I was selfish, cruel, and ungrateful. And inside, she digested the raw, unvarnished truth. Delilah had no idea what Audrey knew, and she didn't realize that the mask she was trying so desperately to maintain was already cracked beyond repair. The divorce took a few weeks to finalize. Delilah stayed at Audrey's house that entire time, always with an excuse to delay making any real decisions about her future. She spent her days scrolling through her phone, complaining about her bad luck, and justifying her mistakes as misunderstandings, as if life itself owed her an apology. When the papers were finally signed, the confirmation came. She would receive a reasonable settlement enough to sustain her for a good while, rent a place, and start a new life. It wasn't the fortune she had expected, but it was fair. Even with the money in her hand, she remained at Audrey's. 1 month after she had first arrived, on an ordinary afternoon, Audrey asked to talk. They sat on the couch. Delilah assumed it was another conversation about finding an apartment or getting a job, but Audrey's expression was firm. Her words were direct. "Delilah, you need to leave." Delilah frowned, surprised. "Why now? If it's about money, I can pay rent. I can help with the expenses. It's no problem." Audrey shook her head. Not with anger, just with determination. "It's not about that." She paused, took a breath, and delivered the final blow. "I'm dating Caleb." The silence that followed was like an explosion without a sound. Delilah felt the world spin. Her mouth went dry. Her breath caught in her throat. "What?" "We've grown closer after all of this," Audrey said calmly. "We've talked a lot. It started slowly, but it's happening. And honestly, it doesn't make sense for you to live here with me anymore." Delilah shot up from the couch as if she'd been slapped. Her eyes filled with tears, but it was her pride that was bleeding more than any real feeling. "You're a traitor," she hissed. "A fake. You pretended to be my friend, listened to me cry, saw me broken, and you went behind my back with him." Audrey didn't shout. She didn't defend herself. She simply looked at Delilah in silence, already at peace with her choice. With no alternatives left, Delilah packed her bags and went to her mother's house. The childhood bedroom she thought she had escaped forever was now her new shelter. Small, stuffy, filled with old furniture and memories she'd rather forget. The weeks dragged on into months. She tried to move forward, but nothing worked. She avoided social media, but sometimes, the temptation was too strong. It was on one of those lonely afternoons that she saw the photo. It was me and Audrey. We were at a resort, facing the sea. The same kind of paradise she had tried to steal for herself. We had sincere smiles on our faces, glasses raised in a toast, our hands entwined on the table. The caption I had written was simple, but loaded with meaning. "Starting over was the best decision of my life." Delilah stared at the screen for minutes, the phone heavy in her hand. Her chest tightened. That image was a perfect mirror of what could have been, what she had built, and what she had destroyed with her own 2 hands. And there, in the suffocating silence of her past, with no one around to blame, she thought bitterly, her voice a hollow whisper in the empty room. "What have I done?" Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.